it so seems. 1 Samuel chapter 25 simply says, "Now Samuel died." And we've spent so much time seeing the life of Samuel, the work of Samuel, the picture of who he is in terms of seeming to be this light in the days of great darkness. One who comes along and anoints the one who will be king over Israel. And it seems that with this simple sentence, we have a passing of the torch from the prophet who anointed to the one who is anointed in David. I can't help but see a number of similarities where we have seen regarding Samuel that his intensity in terms of his narrative has faded away slowly, little by little, little by little. We haven't read much about him over the last few chapters, and suddenly we're just ended with the "and he died" moment, very much like John the Baptizer, where he starts off strong and then gives away to the one to whom he was pointing. And here we are now with the rise of David, as all of Israel mourns for Samuel in verse 1, yet David arises in verse 1 and he goes to the wilderness of Paran. We talked about last time, we'll remind ourselves of it again. Chapters 24, 25, and 26. 3 times is going to speak of David going into the wilderness. Picture here as if David is going through 3 temptations while in the wilderness. Another connection is that by going out to the wilderness of Paran, that is the very same wilderness where Israel wandered in the wilderness and was also put under the test by God at the same time. And so now David is in the wilderness, and we are introduced to 2 people that we have not seen before. It is fascinating the way God tells this narration about how this all transpires, because it tries to conceal this man's name for about as long as possible. It begins in verse 2 by saying there's a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel. He was very rich. He has 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he's shearing his sheep in Carmel. So this is a time of feasting and celebration. It was considered in those days, if you were shearing your sheep and gathering in of that you would, in a hospitable way, share that with people because you are celebrating. This is a great time, especially for someone like this man who has 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats, and was told to us that he's extremely rich. We're finally revealed his name in verse 3, that his name is Nabal. Now that's the reason that's interesting, not to us, but it is in the Hebrews, because that word simply means fool. You can imagine as soon as that came up, as people are reading this story and hearing this account about this man who has all of this wealth and all of these sheep, and he's enjoying great wealth from God, and here he is in this time of festivity, that it turns out his name is Fool. By contrast, you see that his wife's name is Abigail. Abigail's name is quite the opposite. Her name means "my father is delighted." So he is just called Fool. Her name is "my father is delighted." And you will notice that both of them apparently live up to their name. In verse 3, we're told the woman was discerning and beautiful, but the man was harsh and badly behaved. And so, right along with their names, so they also acted at this moment. Well, since we see Nabal is in Carmel and he has this great wealth, and it's a time of festivity, it's shearing his sheep, and it's a time when there's great celebration. Verse 4 tells us that David hears about that Nabal is shearing the sheep. He sends 10 young men to go to Nabal. And basically the message is very simple. To go up to him, and in verse 5 it says, I want you to greet him by name. Verse 6, you'll notice 3 pronouncements of peace. Peace be to you, peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. I hear that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we did them no harm, and they missed nothing all the time that they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, or we come on a feast day. Please give whatever you have at hand to your servants and to your son, David. And so David's message is simply, when your shepherds were out here in the field and they were tending sheep, We made sure they were safe. We made sure they were treated well. We made sure that no harm came to your shepherds or to your sheep. Since it's a feast day, and I want you to hear the parenthesis, the implied, a feast day is when great hospitality should be offered up, when we should be sharing the wealth, if you will. We also were helpful to you in that process of you being able to enjoy this feast day. And so as you see best, please allow us to enjoy some of the feasting. Verse 9, when David's young men came, they said all this to Nabal in the name of David, and they waited. And Nabal answered David's servants, "Who is David? Who is the son of Jesse?" Let's just start with that response. It's not that he doesn't know who David is. All of Israel knows who David is. We know that all of Israel has sang the song about how David has killed his 10,000. Everybody knows that he is the anointed one. What Nabal is doing is being extraordinarily derogatory in this. Who is David? Never heard of the guy. He is a nobody. And then please notice what else he calls him. Who is the son of Jesse? Now remember, Saul is running around always saying that. Saul is the one who's always calling David in a derogatory term, that son of Jesse. Never calls him by name ever since the hunt began that Saul has had in trying to kill David. Always the son of Jesse, the son of Jesse. In fact, you might also remember Doeg, the Edomite, also called David not by his name, but the son of Jesse, I know where he is. So already the response is highly negative, highly derogatory. Not only that, the rest of verse 10, there are many servants these days who are breaking away from their masters. Seems we have a problem these days. There's a lot of runaway slaves leaving their masters. You see what he's calling David. David, not only are you a nobody, but you've broken away from your master Saul. You are a nobody out here in the wilderness on the run. Therefore, as he says in verse 11, shall I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have killed for my shearers and give it to men who come from I don't know where? In short, you all are a bunch of nobodies, and I don't care who you are, and I don't care where you're from, and I'm not going to give you anything of my own. There's your message. Who are you, David? So in verse 12, David's young men turn away, and they go back and tell David all this. David said to his men in verse 13, every man strap on his sword. And every man then strapped on his sword. David also strapped on his sword. And about 400 men went up after David, while 200 men remained with the baggage. So we're not told this yet. It's being applied by the language. Back in verse 6, you'll notice David's message is a threefold peace. Peace to you, peace to your house, and peace be to all that you have. Notice now the contrast is a three-piece response of strap on your sword. So notice that 3 times in verse 13. Every man strapped on his sword, and every man strapped on his sword. And David also strapped on his sword. We already keep telling us everybody's strapping on their swords, because we're going to reverse peace right now. It's being implied David and his men are strapping on swords, not to say, hi, how you doing? But we're going to not have peace. I'm going to come after you. Gathers 400 men, leaves 200 behind with the supplies. Verse 14. One of the young men now tells Abigail, Nabal's wife, behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to greet our master, and he railed at them. Yet the men were very good to us, and we suffered no harm, and we did not miss anything when we were in the fields, as long as we went with them. They were a wall to us, both by night and by day, all the while we were with them, keeping the sheep. Now, therefore, know this, and consider what you should do. For harm is determined against our master, and against all of his house. And he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. So you can see when the servant's running to Abigail and saying, Abigail, we've got problems. He just told off the anointed and said he's a nobody who doesn't have any portion and is a runaway slave and is basically from nowhere, doesn't care about him, is not going to enjoy any of this feast day, which is a total insult. Even if David was a nobody, in ancient Near Eastern times, you should have been hospitable on this feast day, never mind the fact that we see David and his men did help with the sheep, as well as never mind the fact that David is the anointed. And so, the servant runs to Abigail and says, you better do something because he railed at those men and we're doomed. And notice the point. He says, you're going to have to talk to him because you know I can't because he doesn't listen to anybody. That'd be a fun whole side sermon, just to ask yourself that question. Would that be said of you? He's such a worthless person that no one can speak to him. A very dangerous idea there. We need to be people who listen and not be a fool like Nabal, that even the servant says, you won't listen to a thing that we have to say. So we notice in verse 18, Abigail quickly puts together a huge amount to be able to greet David and his men. 200 loaves, 200 skins of wine, 5 sheep already prepared, 5 seahs of parched grain, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on donkeys. And he says to his young men, there in verse 19, go before me and I will come after you. She did not tell her husband Nabal. Verse 20, as she rode on the donkey, she came under the cover of the mountain. Behold, David and his men came down toward her, and she met them. So David and his 400 men, sword strapped, ready to go, are already on their way to where Nabal and his family and their household is. And Abigail then intercepts them along the way. Verse 21, now David had said, surely in vain have I guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. And he has returned me evil for good. God do so to the enemies of David, and more also, if by morning I leave so much as a male of all who belong to him. So the servant was right. This was going to go poorly. David has gathered his 400 men, and notice his thinking. His thinking is, we help these people for nothing. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go wipe them all out. You're going to return evil on me for the good that I've done. I'm going to do something about it. Now, I hope those words sound shocking to you, that he says those things. You might recall, these words sound a lot like Saul. Saul said that to Jonathan. Remember when Jonathan had taken some of the honey, not knowing about the command of Saul, Saul said basically the same words. God do so to me if I do not kill him. You might also remember, this sounds awfully similar to when Saul encountered the priests from Nob. I'm going to kill all of these priests. So then turns and asks his men to do it, and they go, no way, we're not going to do that. And it takes Doeg to utterly wipe them out. I'm going to destroy everybody. Notice David saying the same thing. I'm going to wipe out every male that is in this house. Verse 23. When Abigail saw David, she hurried and got down from the donkey and fell before David on her face and bowed to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, on me alone, my Lord, be the guilt. Please let your servant speak in your ears and hear the words of your servant. Let not my Lord regard this worthless fellow Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your servant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. So, firstly, don't listen to what my husband said. He is a fool, or how he is responded to. But carefully listen to what Abigail now says. Just listen to the things that she says that are theologically rich. Listen to her in verse 26. Now then, my Lord, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, because the Lord has restrained you from blood guilt, and from saving with your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek to do evil to my Lord be as Nabal. And now let this present that your servant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who follow my Lord. Please forgive the trespass of your servant, for the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you so long as you live. If men rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. And the lives of your enemies he shall sling out from the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord has done to my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you and has appointed you prince over Israel, my Lord shall have no cause of grief or pangs of conscience for having shed blood without cause, or for my Lord working salvation himself. And when the Lord has dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant. That's a great answer that she comes with. She just goes to him and says, you don't want to be guilty of bloodshed. Think about all the promises that God has made to you. God is going to establish you. God is going to put you on the throne. You are going to be prince over Israel. You don't want this to stain you because you have no evil. And God at this point has restrained you from doing something wrong. And so please then forgive this sin and remember me when you are finally placed on the throne and God deals with all of your enemies. Verse 32, David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. Blessed be your discretion, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from blood guilt and from working salvation with my own hand. Those threefold blessed. For as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has restrained me from hurting you, unless you had hurried and come to meet me, surely by morning there would have not been left to Nabal so much as one male. And then David received from her hand what she had brought him. And he said to her, go up in peace to your house. See, I have obeyed your voice, and I have granted your petition. And Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house, a feast like a king. And when Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until morning. Verse 37, in the morning when the wine had gone out of Nabal, his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, and he became as a stone. And about 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. And when David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, blessed be the Lord, who has avenged the insult I have received at the hand of Nabal, and has kept back his servant from wrongdoing. The Lord has returned the evil of Nabal on his own head. And then David sent and spoke to Abigail to take her as his wife. When the servants of David came to Abigail at Carmel, they said to her, David has sent us to you to take you to him as his wife. And she rose and bowed her face to the ground and said, behold, your handmaid is the servant to wash the feet of the servants of my Lord. And Abigail hurried and rose and mounted a donkey, and her 5 young women attended her. She followed the messengers of David and became his wife. Now, watch verse 43. David also took Ahinoam of Jezreel, and both of them became his wives. Saul had given Michal, his daughter, David's wife, to Palti, the son of Laish, who was of Galilee. Good thing we have Wednesday nights to kind of run through a lot of these things. There's a number of lenses to be able to see here in the text. And you'll notice that in this great event, in terms of the vindication of David, and this picture of reversal that happens, it ends on a sour note. There is this ominous overtone of marrying multiple women, which is already this negative picture that's always presented to us. Because God warned in Deuteronomy to the kings not to accumulate wives for themselves or to accumulate riches for themselves. And so we're having this negative ending of things are not going to be what we would hope for in regards to David. Just a little bit of an ominous overtone as this account ends in chapter 25. Again, a number of lenses, but let's stay with what I think is the most important lenses that are intended from this text. We have seen throughout the time of our study of 1 Samuel that we are looking at a number of pictures of the anointed. Now, what we are seeing in regards to David are the pictures of Christ when he comes as the true anointed one to save the people from their sins. And we already noted at the very beginning that it is interesting to see that yet again, David is placed into the wilderness, and he's placed into a particular temptation this time. And this time the temptation is different than what we saw in chapter 24. Because the temptation here is for David to ultimately vindicate himself and to act for his own glory. And we see that in David's words where he's essentially saying, "How dare Nabal insult me? Don't you know who I am? I am the future king. I'm the anointed one. And how dare anybody say something like that about me? That he deserves to have good given to him rather than the evil that was thrown at him." I want you to be mindful of that temptation that we see the devil give Jesus while he is in the wilderness. Remember that we have the devil telling Jesus to go to the pinnacle of the temple and to cast himself off that pinnacle so that angels will lift him up. Now the temple at that time was about 150 feet high. So you can imagine if Jesus goes to the top of the temple, 150 feet high, throws himself off before all of the people and beat the temple, and suddenly angels come in and bear him up, what's going to happen? They're all going to recognize. Clearly, Jesus is the anointed. Clearly, he is the Christ. Clearly, he is everything that he says he is. And so the temptation that Satan is giving to Jesus is very simple. Act for your own name. Act for your own glory. Show everybody who you are. By the way, that's not the only time that happens. You might remember, Jesus' own brothers throw that temptation at him. When it's time to go to Jerusalem for the feast, they tell Jesus, "You ought to go down there if you really are who you say you are." Remember, the brothers don't believe. Go down to Jerusalem, and you go and show them who you are. And Jesus didn't go. Not immediately. Not with them at that point. It was not about Jesus trying to act for his own glory, to act and try to show who he is and vindicate himself in that kind of way. That would be left in the hands of God. And ultimately, you see David do that very thing with the words that he says there in verse 39, and recognizing that the Lord is taking care of this. The Lord has vindicated me. The Lord has dealt with this wrong, and David doesn't do it himself. And so this is a vital picture that is being given, is that when the true anointed one comes, he's not going to be coming for his own glory. He's not going to be acting on his own behalf and doing what is in his own best interest, which not only did the prophets say that about Christ, but it doesn't take long to read the gospel accounts of Jesus and see that. What is so glorious about being born in Bethlehem to two no-name people? It's not. He doesn't come into the world with fanfare and glory, as well. Here is clearly the anointed. It's only some shepherds that come and recognize him as that. And for all the years of his life, he's not given that kind of recognition. People do not see him as that king, and you see over and over again, Jesus does not act in terms of his own glory and trying to act for his own reputation and name. He always defers that. And so you see Jesus rejecting that temptation, and you see David doing that here. In fact, David admits in verses 32 through 34 that what he was about to go do was wrong. He says, "Blessed be God that he sent you at this moment to prevent me from the wrong I was about to do." He's about to take a Saul moment right here and say, well, I'm in charge and I'm the king and I'm going to act. And thankfully at this moment, this temptation is avoided because of Abigail's intervention. In fact, it is Abigail's speech that is just so rich in picturing what the anointed will do. Verse 28, please forgive the trespass of your servant. Here's going before the anointed David and saying, forgive my servant, forgive Nabal, forgive me for what has happened, for this insult and for this offense. Notice also in verse 28 where she says, the Lord will surely make my Lord, that's David, a sure house. You are going to have a lasting dynasty that the Lord himself is going to establish for you. What true words she could have said about the anointed, what he was going to do. In fact, in verse 28, because my Lord, that is David, is fighting the battles of the Lord. So here's a picture of the anointed. When the anointed comes, he will fight God's battles. And look at the rest of verse 28. And there will not be found any evil in him. It's amazing what she says to David, which is so prophetic about what the anointed will be, about how he will have this lasting dynasty and fight the Lord's battles and will have no evil found with him. In fact, in verse 29, the prophecy continues that men will rise up and pursue you and seek your life. The life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living in the care of the Lord your God. The picture is God is going to protect his anointed. He's going to keep you safe. In fact, he's going to keep you so safe. The end of verse 29, the lives of your enemies shall be like rocks that are slung out of a sling. Which I can't help but wonder if there's not a David and Goliath imagery going on there. Like, remember that slings and stones? Well, that's going to be like your enemies. They're going to fly out of that sling. That God is going to protect you, and he's going to take away these enemies. And listen to verse 30. That the Lord is going to do good to my Lord, and everything that he has spoken to you concerning you and has appointed you as prince over Israel. The Lord is going to establish you as prince. He's going to make you king. He will fulfill every good word that he's made to you. And then notice even in verse 31 that the anointed is not going to personally avenge himself for the evil that he's done, that's been done against him. That's what you see her declaring about David. That he will not shed this blood without cause, listen, or for my Lord working salvation for himself. And when the Lord is dealt well with my Lord, then remember your servant. What a picture that's given here over and over again about what the Lord is going to do for his anointed. One more, and it appears in verse 39. Blessed be the Lord who has avenged the insult that I received at the hand of Nabal, has kept his servant back from wrongdoing. The Lord has returned evil. So notice the anointed is depending upon the Lord to vindicate. These pictures are all throughout the New Testament. We've already noted them many times. We talked about like 1 Peter chapter 2 that talks about Christ who did not essentially avenge himself, who did not retaliate, but entrusted himself to the one who judges justly or judges rightly. Here, Abigail's words are just soaked with pictures of ultimately what the anointed has come to do, and we've seen it in David, that David will be the representation of that. And as much as I would love to spend so much more time talking about that, I want to get to our applications, and we'll do a lot more with this chapter when we get to our Wednesday night. So let's move into some applications, some important messages that I think are critical for us to see in the near failure of David at this moment and the wise words of Abigail. First, so simple. We sin when we think about ourselves. That's what the title of the lesson, Thinking About Me. How often we ultimately sin because we are thinking about ourselves. Notice the first person that does that is Nabal. Nabal says, it's my bread, it's my water, it's my meat that I killed for my shears. It's hard not to hear the rich fool who talks about my barns and my riches. Well, Nabal's talking like that. Nabal's saying, why am I going to give you all my stuff? It's my food and my animals and my everything. Why am I going to give you a bit of it? And the reason we see this foolishness is ultimately because he is thinking about me. It's mine, mine, mine. And he's not looking beyond himself. Notice David's doing the same thing. David does the same thing in verse 21. Because he says, surely in vain I have guarded all that this fellow has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that belonged to him. And he has returned me evil for good. David's doing the same thing. I've been wronged. How dare anybody treat me in this way? How dare they not recognize who I am and all the good that I've done? Here is what I deserve. And friends, this is often where our sin comes in. Is that sin comes from thinking about me. It is the cause of so many life problems and the cause of so many sins. And we have to tell ourselves that God's constantly saying, stop thinking about me. Because we think about what people have done to us, what they have said to us, or that these things are mine, my wealth is mine, and all this belongs to me. And perhaps the worst is like you see in David, which is, well, I deserve a certain kind of treatment. I deserve somebody to behave a particular way. They should respect me. They should do this because I did that. That's what David's doing right here. And ultimately, we do commit so many sins because we're thinking about ourselves and what our expectation is and what we deserve from other people. I want you to think about the contrast of this before we apply it. Is Abigail does the absolute opposite. In all of her actions, she's not thinking about herself. I mean, notice what David said is he was going to kill all the males. Maybe she just would have been, well, we all would be better off around here without all these ding-dongs around here because he is a fool. The servant correctly asserts that, and she even asserts that. That's given to us. But rather than doing what seems to be in her own best interest, you will notice that she comes to the rescue of her husband, and the text is very clear. He does not deserve that. He does not deserve her intervention in the slightest. That is clear throughout the text. The servant says he's a fool. God kills him 10 days later after this in proof of the evil that Nabal has done. And yet, in spite of the fact that he does deserve a judgment upon him, Abigail knows what's in Nabal's best interest. By the way, not only in recognizing that he's a complete fool in this process, and still does good by him, she's also doing good to David, though he doesn't deserve it. Because the way he's talking is also quite selfish. How dare Nabal talk to me like that? You know, very much a, don't you know what I did? Don't you know what I deserve? Don't you know how I helped you? I think this is such an important principle that is being laid out here, is that the reason why Abigail does right is because it is the right thing to do. And we've become very unhinged from this in our culture. We look at things and go, well, if they don't deserve my kindness or my mercy or my forgiveness or whatever it is, then I'm not going to do it. And I want you to see in this whole account, Abigail is doing good, and nobody deserves what Abigail's doing. Nabal doesn't deserve it. David's worthy of condemnation for how he's responding to Nabal. And I want us to think about Abigail at this moment. She does good because it's the right thing to do. Please think about this. She's not acting for her own good here, but acting for the good of others. She's doing what's in everybody else's best interest at this moment. She is exemplifying exactly what Paul was trying to teach Christians in recognizing we do nothing from selfish ambition. We do nothing out of arrogance or conceit. But in humility we count others more significant than ourselves, not looking to our own interests, but also for the interests of others. She is just displaying this at this moment. She is so willing to do the right thing by her husband, and to also do the right thing by David. When Paul wrote to the Christians in Corinth, you might remember he noted how these Christians were taking each other to court. And in one of his conclusions, he draws a lot of solutions to their problems. And one of his solutions that he simply gives to them is in verse 7 of chapter 6, when he just simply says, why not be wronged and why not be defrauded? Why do you have to get what you think you deserve at the moment? That you're so right, just be defrauded. Just be wrong. I think that is so important to think about it in this picture here. In what you see happening in this moment, she steps in and stops evil from perpetuating. When it comes to our relationships, at some point, somebody has to stop the spiral. This is something that I have seen for such a long time in doing what I do. Is in relationships. I don't care what relationship dynamic you're talking about, whether it is marriage or in friendships or in work or in family. What always seems to happen to cause this ultimate explosion of the relationship is no one will stop the cycle of evil. What I mean by that is somebody does wrong, and so I'm justified to do wrong back. Well, they receive that wrong, and what do they think? Well, you wronged me, so now I get to wrong you. And then that person says, well, you just wronged me, so now I get to wrong you. And it is just a spiral that keeps going and going. Somebody has to stand up like Abigail and say, we're going to stop the evil cycle. We're not going to just keep doing evil upon evil upon evil. Abel did something wrong, so David will do something wrong. And we'll just keep going back and forth and back and forth. What you see Abigail do, I think, is so important here. Because it teaches us a very important message about how we think about others and how we respond to others. Is that we are supposed to be the ones who are the peacemakers. We are supposed to be the ones who do not just simply retaliate. We don't respond in the same way that people have acted toward us. We don't have a right to say certain things because they said ugly, hurtful things to us, or respond and act in such a way because they did ugly, hurtful things to us. Think about how many marriages are destroyed because no one will stop the evil cycle. How many family relationships are destroyed because no one will stop the evil cycle. How many friendships are destroyed because no one will stop the evil cycle. It's simply back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And no one will just stand up and say, let's just quit this. And just take the hurt, take the wrong, and do good in the face of evil. I think that is such an important message. And we need to ask, I think this is a big important question because it is difficult to do good and do right in the face of evil coming at you. They are doing something wrong or something hurtful, something painful. They're saying or doing something. So why should I do something good when they're doing something so terrible to me? And I have a very simple answer. Because that's what Jesus did for you. That's what it always boils down to. Because that's what he did for you. Friends, we've all been able to our anointed. In the narrative, we are the neighbor. We are the ones who have said to the anointed, it's my meat, and my food, and my stuff that I've put together for my family, and I've made my provisions, and it's all about me. We're the neighbor. That's how we've behaved toward God. And God's response has been forgiveness. God's response has not been to return evil for evil, but even as we looked up this morning, that he came to save sinners. How are we supposed to do right when someone does wrong to us? Because that's all that God has ever done for us, is do right toward us when we've done wrong toward him. When we are unwilling to do right in the face of wrong, when we're unwilling to stop that evil cycle, when we're unwilling to do what is good and kind to the other person, even though they don't deserve it, then we're forgetting how undeserving we are of what God's done for us. In Abigail's shoes, Nabal is absolutely undeserving of her intervention. And so is David. And yet in these pictures, you are seeing a picture and a reminder that we are to let God be the vindicator of us. That's what is so great about how the narrative concludes, is David is finally able to say, I realize that God's going to take care of this. I don't have to be the one to do this. I don't have to vindicate myself. If we had another hour, I'd just say, you know how many times anger stems from the idea of we need to vindicate ourselves. We need to get our 2 cents in. We need to be right. And here is God saying, that's not how I treated you. The reason you can do right towards somebody else is because God has done such good toward each one of us. Let's go to God in prayer as we close. Heavenly Father, we ask for forgiveness for when we have thought and acted like Nabal in this account. Where we have looked at everything as if it is all our doing, as if it's our own hand, our own power, as if it's ours to begin with, as if we deserve it. Forgive us for thinking that way. Help us to remember that everything that we have is from you. Every blessing we have, every possession we have, every job that we have, every family member that we have, and our very lives are all because you have given them to us. Help us to not forget it. Lord, forgive us for acting like fools. We pray for a wisdom to no longer act in that way, to see our submission to you, and to understand that everything belongs to you. Lord, forgive us for as often as we have not been good and kind in our responses to evil. Forgive us for when we have taken the hurts and the wrongs, the things that people have said and done to us, and we have responded with evil. Even though, Lord, that's not what you want from us. Give us a gentle spirit. Give us the kind of spirit that's ready to respond with words of kindness and good actions that reflect you when we are hurt, when we are wronged. God, give us the faith to trust that in the end you are a just God. You will sort it all out. You will bring justice to all people and to this earth. That we would trust in your judgments, not in our own. In Jesus' name. Amen. The invitation song is now going to be sung, and we invite you to respond to it.